Fallout New Vegas is simultaneously one of the most, but also one of the least inspiring RPGs ever created. It's one of the best because it managed to tell a captivating story which takes place in an intricate wasteland with multiple diverse factions, with all of your choices and actions changing and altering the way the world will be shaped. It's one of the worst because they've simply recorded an average night out in Las Vegas and ended up painting it brown, and then we're like, okie dokie, let's slap a title on it and call it a video game. If the fact that more and more countries nowadays can't fight the urge to plunge themselves into conflict and war with one another wasn't a big enough telltale sign that the world is about to end, the fact that we actually managed to get a video game show adaptation that does not suck definitely is. The show is so good, as a matter of fact, that within a week of its release, Nexus mods completely fell apart as people were rushing to their website trying to save the bug-infested, clunky and dumpy mess of a video game which carries the title of Fallout New Vegas. Or, as the community likes to call it, the only good one after Fallout 1 and 2. We, and with we, I mean people who do not leave the house and occasionally spend 5 weekends in a row modding a save file trying to figure out why in the fuck our characters have turned pink or our meshes are floating exclamation marks, know that New Vegas is the best entry in the series, but it must be pretty tough for people who've never heard of this game and then suddenly try to give it a go. Imagine you know nothing about it and look it up on Steam. You've got 2 entries that release in an area most of us hadn't even been born yet, then 10 years later a 3rd entry released with some pretty mixed results that wasn't even made by the original developers, but then the people who released that 3rd entry forced a smaller studio to make a standalone follow-up to their game that managed to become a cult classic, only for them to then release an actual follow-up to their game that was pretty good but was also as much of a role-playing game as a refrigerator can be called a car.
If you're here to talk me into working on Liberty Prime, you can forget it.
What changed your mind?
Nothing changed my mind.
Do I need to remind you?
No, that won't be necessary. It's going to take a hell of a lot of work to get Liberty Prime back online.
What the fuck? Oh, and then they destroyed their entire series with a live service cash grab. So, yeah, we'll be focusing on this one.
Do you like eating? Good. You owe me your entire goddamn garbage existence.
New Vegas isn't a video game, it's a conundrum for people with micromanagement issues. Remember back in kindergarten how there always was that one kid that wanted to own all the toys, make up all of the rules of every game you played, and if he didn't get his way, tried everything in his power to change it by bending the rules? Wait, am I describing kindergarten or working for a boss in a 9-to-5 job? In any case, that kid turned out to be every New Vegas player. I don't like the way my companions look. I'm sure there's a mod for that. I don't like the way the lighting in this room looks. I'm sure there's a mod for that. When my character walks, her milk bags don't jingle jangle enough. Unfortunately, there's a mod to fix that. Some of you really need to leave the house more. I am God, and the Mojave is my playground. New Vegas gives you the power to do the things you can't do in real life without breaking the law, meaning overdosing on drugs followed up by committing genocide only to end up getting drunk and gambling all of your money away. After spending the first 2 days after your purchase going through mod lists the length of the Bible, you boot up the game to find yourself on your knees, hands tied, surrounded by men, which, if you're a female character, is pretty weird, and if you're a male character, well, it's also still pretty fucking weird, only to end up getting one tapped in the skull to magically get resurrected in the town of Good Springs. After a short summary from the doc, you learn that the guy who rearranged your brain matter is called Benny, the least intimidating name for, coincidentally, the least intimidating character in the entire game. And now it's up to you to go after him for 2 reasons: get your revenge and take away his monopoly on the gambling market in the Mojave as he stole your platinum chip. Before you'll do that though, the game takes you through the best gaming tutorial ever created, one that you can fucking skip. The game takes you through a creative tutorial session, in which it slowly but surely explains to you how to craft items, use weapons, and interact with the world around you.
My reputation precedes me, I see. No kidding, what'd you cook up? Man, I can't wait to see the look on his face.
New Vegas is often considered to be one of the best role-playing games of all time, which is as much of an understatement as saying that the sun tends to be kinda warm. From the get-go, the game lays out the way every single scenario you are going to experience in the next few dozens if not hundreds of hours is going to play out. You will enter an area, town, or village with multiple people in it who have a multitude of issues, and depending on the way you set up your character will result in the way you will solve these issues. This can range from brokering peace to infiltrating a building to showing off your painting skills just the way Benny taught you. You can make this considerably easy for yourself by building up a character that actually excels in certain things. Think of science, speech, gun skills, etc. In 99% of other games, this stuff would result in one of 2 things. Option A, very cookie cutter and predetermined ways to complete a mission, essentially telling you pick either this or that. Or option B, a huge "you are a failure at life" screen, indicating that what you tried to do did in fact not work at all, because everything is streamlined. New Vegas made every character in the game killable without resulting in mission failure. The only thing you can't kill is your personal fist bot, but that kinda makes sense as you need him to actively push the story forward. But unless you want to celebrate your next birthday party alone together with a handful of super mutants and your fuckbot, it might be handy to actually communicate with these people, or at least try to, instead of sending them all to radioactive hell. So, to give a quick summary of what you can expect.
Don't worry. I won't have you lashed to a cross like the rest of these degenerates.
There are essentially two major factions that get name dropped every 5 minutes or so, the NCR and the Legion. The NCR is what Democrats think the world should look like. The Legion is what conservatives think the world should look like. This means that on paper the NCR looks like your typical everybody should be equal and everybody deserves a chance, only for you to find out halfway throughout the game that their leadership can't agree with one another about anything whatsoever, actively resulting in nothing but racism, corruption and inequality. The Legion, on the other hand, fully admits that they're deranged psychopaths who hate everybody that ever so slightly diverges from their ideas of a perfect tyrannical state, resulting in a state existing of racism, corruption and inequality. In case you got triggered by this political comparison to our real world, do remember that at any point you can just walk up to any of these people and pump nothing short of 7 kilograms of lead into their chest cavity. But if neither of these factions work for your ethical alignments, there's an alternative, namely Mr. House.
He swallowed a magnet. We gotta cut it out.
How old are you?
8.
And he swallowed something stuck to a fridge. Darwin says let him die.
Wrong House. House, on paper, seems like the most sane choice as he wants to use the platinum chip to increase security on the strip, but it won't take long until you figure out that he kinda wants to rule the entire wasteland by upgrading his Securitrons into full-blown war machines. This is something Benny figured out, making him turn on House behind his back, and even though he totally planned on using this knowledge for himself to also become all-powerful, it's still quite ironic, as that would almost make Benny seem like a good guy, but I can't quite recall what ended up happening to him. After reacquiring your market monopoly moneymaker, you can decide to team up with either House or your Fistatron 9000 to take over the wasteland, but not before deciding what to do with all of the remaining smaller factions, which are all a lot more reasonable than the ones we already discussed. Or not. New Vegas is as much a small talk simulator as it is a Call of Duty wannabe. So while you make your spurs jingle jangle ranking up that Pip-Boy step counter trying to figure out which of these factions you actually want to spare, you run into various dangerous wasteland enemies like ghouls, deathclaws, red roaches and women. With the right mods here and there, you'll turn New Vegas from an action-adventure game into a C-rank horror survival one. This is where the skills we discussed in the beginning really begin to shine. If you have a low intelligence character, it changes most of the dialogue from normal sentences into read, start, comments, and if you have high perception, it actually shows new type of dialogue as your keen eye notices things a normal character wouldn't. Maxing out your medicinal skills allow for greater health gain from health items, whilst more obvious things like lockpicking and science skills allow you to lockpick harder locks or hack harder passwords. On top of that, you'll get a new perk every 2 levels, which means that combining all of this allows for builds that actually play different from one another. The vanilla game is a walk in the park, but to completely sound like a broken record, use mods to actually make the game feel like a challenge, and then all of this stuff starts to feel a whole lot more rewarding. You might think, how can you say a game can be great if it needs mods to be great? To which I would say, well, it doesn't. It's great even without mods, but as the man-children at Bethesda forced Obsidian to create this game in just 18 months, you really need to cut them some slack. In general, there's no shortage of videos on the internet explaining why Bethesda's games always seem so shallow and empty, especially compared to what other studios have done with the source material they have given them. Even now, with the popularity of the Amazon Prime show, Bethesda couldn't help but try and make themselves appear to be useful and oh so customer friendly by shadow dropping a next-gen update, which was not only uncalled for, but also 5 years too late, and also broke more things than it fixed, and last but not least, destroyed all of the mods the community has spent years to create and distribute. It really begs the question of what Fallout 5 is gonna look like, but hey, if we're lucky, we won't even make it until its release date with all of the shit going on in the world, and we might actually end up in those vaults ourselves, instead of watching a show about them. Can you imagine being stuck in the vault with Todd Howard? Our vault has 16 times the detail as the previous vault. Let me out!